Okay, I've looked at some of the editing that you've done for this paper, and certainly it's still not a final paper, and
Yeah.
it wasn't meant to be a final paper still at this point. It's just to give you some practice in doing it. One of the things that I'm going to mention is the title, Mindfulness Improves Physical and Mental Health. Um, that's a good title. It says something. As I've mentioned to you in the past, I think that it's important for you to decide, are you going to focus the report on mental health counselors or on counselors in general, helping professionals? It may be helpful to put that in the title because then it's more specific. So mindfulness can improve
Mm.
um, physical and mental health in helping professionals or mental health counselors or something along that lines. It helps you know from the title what the report is going to be about.
Now, can I make the title as a question mark too? Like, does mindful
Yes,
improve physical and mental health?
yes,
And then,
sometimes it can be very effective to use a question mark in a title.
okay,
It depends upon what you want to. When you use a question like that, it may be that your report is going to be more exploring. If it's really clear, like if the literature is really clear as this works, then you probably want to say, this is something that works. It's something that happens. But on the other hand, you may have found out that although mindfulness does help physical and mental health in general, there really isn't good research that says it helps helping professionals.
yeah,
And so then a question may be kind of a way to get people's attention. You begin by saying stress levels are on the rise, especially among helping professionals. That's a really good opening sentence. National Institute on Mental Health has emphasized the physical and emotional consequences of mental stress, saying that stress is our brain's response to outside demands. Like we said in the past, you put the two sentences together so that you mention National
yeah,
Institute of Mental Health once, and then you put both ideas in the same sentence. So that's a
okay,
really good kind of edit that you made from the previous one. Mental health professionals are highly susceptible to experience long-term stress, and you've got a reference about that. Uh, this paper is going to highlight the importance of mindfulness in relation to increasing stress levels. Again, in mental health counselors or whatever is inclusion, the author will appeal to mental health professionals to engage in mindfulness to work in an optimum state. So that's a really good way to end. It says what the purpose of the paper is. It helps the reader know right from the very beginning what you're trying to do. Now you notice you've got a heading, stress and health, and then another heading, mindfulness and stress, and then a heading for conclusion. That really makes it easy for a reader to see how the paper is structured. And the headings say enough that you're going to get some sense of what's in each section. So that's well done.
now, do I need to mention though about headings, like how the paper will flow? Because I just give an overview kind of thing. Do I need to mention in the opening paragraph, like what will be the subsequent headings
Sometimes you
or?
can do that. It depends. This paper is fairly short at the moment.
Okay,
And so the thing is by saying what you're going to focus on in terms of the purpose and what you're going to do, it's probably okay. And the
okay,
headings are pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes you could write in there, this paper will, um, you know, uh, show evidence how stress leads to health problems, and will then show how mindfulness can help reduce stress outcomes. And it will then talk about how this can be very helpful for helping professionals or mental health counselors.
okay,
So that would be, when you say that, that would mean that, the reader would be expecting kind of like a one, two, three in terms of your, so you're going to talk about stress and how it leads to health. You're going to talk about
okay,
mindfulness and
okay,
how it helps. And then you're going to focus specifically on mindfulness and in mental health counselors. And so then I'd be expecting kind of like three different headings before the
okay,
conclusion, if that was the way that you presented at the beginning, and that would be a perfectly good way to
okay,
do that. Um, Stress is explained as a reaction to outside demands in our brain. Stress is a reaction to outside demands by your name is probably goes to make a more active voice, a more direct statement. Or NIMH says that stress is a reaction to it's, this is in passive voice at this
Okay, yeah,
particular point in
yeah,
time, so it helps to make it an active voice. You've got some mentions in here, psychological researchers concern over increasing level stress amongst mental health professionals. So you're kind of getting in there. That's why I think that, focusing all parts of this on the mental health professionals is a helpful thing to do. And so what you're doing is you've shown that, okay, this is the types of stress that really affect people. The emotional exhaustion, increased depression, and anxiety are good things to point out. And there's many different professionals that you might want to work with in terms of this. So that's a good kind of summary of what's going on there. What you want to do is when you are writing more final paper, you want to make a decision about whether more detail will strengthen your points. That's helpful in terms of knowing who your audience is and how much you need to put this across. If this is just a very brief report, this will work very well.
yeah.
But in order to make it stronger, you may need to include a little bit more detail about it as you are kind of working towards a more final copy of the report. Mindfulness. So you've defined mindfulness here, and so that's a very good way to begin, as we mentioned before. Furtherhand, you mentioned here you're going to add more information from Shapiro et al. So the thing is that's obviously something you're going to have to add more information in. So to add a little bit more detail about this definition, because you know that there's something in that article, so that's something you continue to add. Increased mindfulness associated with decreased stress. Okay, this is a really good statement. One of the things, again, is you may want to give a little bit more detail about how they found that out. Give a little bit more detail about the studies, about the research. Who were the participants? Okay. What was the methodology? How did they come about with significant results? Because that'll strengthen this.
Okay.
Now, if you need something really short and to the point, this works out really well. If you need something that's going to be a bit more, persuasive, you want to talk a little bit about where the methodology of these studies and why they really are, they've shown really significant results.
Like, and shall I add more authors?
If you could.
2 is enough?
2 maybe, it depends. It also, as we were mentioning, if any of these authors have focused on researching mindfulness use by mental health professionals, that's really strong because that's what your report is on. My guess is they haven't.
No.
And so what you're going to do is you're going to talk about that later on as a limitation. Okay, we haven't really, there really doesn't seem to be much literature that's talked about it and found that it's helpful for mental health professionals, but since it's helpful for other people, it should be helpful for mental health professionals. And further research looking at this would be really a good thing to have. And so you can be calling for further research at the same time you're saying mental health professionals should do this because it's going to help them with their job.
Okay.
That can lead back to your self-care point before, is because there is literature, there is research that says self-care is part of doing a good job for a mental health professional. And then you're linking mindfulness as a type of self-care. So you've got it's a logical approach where you're going to say stress affects the mental health professionals, mindfulness helps deal with stress. Mental health professionals we got research that shows that self-care helps mental health professionals. Although we don't have research that shows that mindfulness helps mental health professionals, we know that mindfulness can help self-care because we've got research showing that. Therefore, it makes sense. So what you're doing is you're presenting an argument so that your recommendations are then going to say, this is a good thing for mental health professionals to try out. And oh, by the way, having some research to support this further would strengthen this even more. And that's where you're going to go. So that's going to go down for your conclusion. you're again reporting on this program, and it's an 8-week program. You want to see, you're mentioning 8-week program here and an 8-week program there, so you want to do some editing so that you're not repeating things. And so much you want to give a little bit more information. What, like, okay, so this would be a good point where you say, okay, what happens in each one of those 8 weeks? What is the topic for each one of those 8 weeks?
Okay.
What are some of the exercises that people, because you also want to give enough information so that a mental health professional reading this report and saying, well, I want to do this, well, they don't have to go look at something else to find out, at least beginning wise, how can I do this? You've got some examples of what they could begin to look into. And you also then may want, because of you've got some references about this program, they could then look up some more information about the program.
Now, I was just wondering, do I need to mention how they have tested the stress levels pre and post? Is that a good addition, or
well, the thing is,
technical?
It depends. It depends on the amount of detail that's needed. To a great extent, it's sufficient in this type of report just to say they did a pre-test and a post-test. Now, sometimes the instrument they use for doing pre-tests and post-tests can actually, if you describe it, it can give people ideas about how mindfulness helps them because it has certain categories of things that they can look at. So in that case, it gives you a little bit more information about how mindfulness works. In that case, describing it would be helpful. But describing it in order to, kind of say that this is a good study probably isn't necessary. Is when you say that they did a pre-test, post-test in terms of their methodology, that's probably sufficient for this type of paper. Your conclusion is, again, is a pretty good summary. The other thing is that you added references here, and that's a good thing because you want to start getting your reference list together. Obviously, there's some references that you have to do a little bit more work with. You've got the, it seems like they may line up with the citations.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed when I looked at it, you have a Shapiro and Brown, and you have a Shapiro Brow and Beagle. And you just want to be sure that this isn't Shapiro Brown and Beagle, that you got it spelled right. I don't know because I don't know what the reference is. It could be the Brow is right, but since they're so close, it may just be a typographical error. And those are the kinds of things you want to be sure that you take a look at when you are looking at your reference list and making sure that that's correct.
All right.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right.